Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and watching Al24 News live from Algiers. Coming up next now, World News Program. Thick black smoke rises from a factory destroyed by Russian missiles in the airport district of Lviv, a major Ukrainian city near the Polish border. Following the shelling of theatre in Mariupol, rescuers are continuing work to extract survivors from a three-story building in the besieged city of Mariupol, where hundreds of people had been hiding for shelter. President Joe Biden will hold a call with his Chinese counterpart amid growing U.S. concerns over Beijing's relationship with Russia. And finally, Argentina's Senate gave final legislative approval for President Alberto Fernandez's administration to refinance the government's $45 billion debt with the International Monetary Fund and avoid a default. Welcome again, and we start with the latest regarding the Russian Ukrainian thorny file. Russian strikes have hit the capital Kiev and Kharkiv and Kramatorsk in the east, causing casualties, Ukrainian officials say. Missiles have destroyed an aircraft repair plant near the airport in the western Ukrainian city of Lviv. Andriy Sadovy says Russian troops and separatist allies are fighting in the center of Mariupol against nationalists, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. Ukraine says 3,810 people were evacuated from cities on Thursday, including about 2,000 who left the besieged city of Mariupol. And finally, U.S. President Joe Biden is expected to warn Chinese President Xi Jinping against supporting Russia during a phone call on Friday. Thick black smoke rises from factory destroyed by Russian missiles in the airport district of Lviv, a major Ukrainian city near the Polish border. City residents were woken up by air raid sirens just before dawn. Hussein Blinken reports.
Clouds of black smoke were seen rising on the horizon of Lviv on Friday morning. According to the city's mayor, Andriy Sadovy, several missiles hit aircraft repair plants on the airport complex in the western of Ukrainian city, destroying a building. He added that the plant had been stopped and there were no casualties from the strike. This is the first time Russia bombed western cities near the Poland border.
Several missiles hit an aircraft repair factory. The building was destroyed by gunfire. The operation of the factory had been suspended before, so there are no casualties for the moment.
In a statement, the Ukrainian Air Force said that according to preliminary information, the area had been hit by 4 Russian cruise missiles fired from the Black Sea, several hundred kilometers away. 2 Russian missiles were shot down by Ukrainian anti-crafts defenses before reaching their target, according to the source. Located in western Ukraine, the major city of Lviv has been spared the fighting, which urged a number of embassies to move their operations there, as it was thought to be a much safer location. But the Russian army bombarded the Ukrainian military base in this region on Sunday, killing at least 30 people.
Following the shelling of a theatre in Mariupol, rescuers are continuing work to extract survivors from a 3-story building in the besieged city of Mariupol, where hundreds of people had been hiding for shelter. Nabil Khazini has more details.
A besieged city under shelling. What can be worse? This is the situation now in Mariupol. This theater was a shelter for many, but it was bombed. After the incident, civilians are said to be emerging alive from the ruins. But for every hardship there is a hero. Here, this doctor in Mariupol, despite the difficulties, tries to save those who may have survived after the bombing.
Because all the other hospitals were bombed, and none could collect them. There's no emergency services. There's nobody. Relatives, I don't know where we will put them, how we will bury them. In a mass grave, I have no idea. The District 17 hospital does not accept them. Emergency does not take them. We're the only location that takes injured people in. There is no other place.
Mariupol has been under blockade for 16 days, and its residents have nowhere to hide. except in shelters and even basements, which are now home for newborn babies.
It is a city, residential buildings. SOS, help Mariupol. Children, women are being killed. Hospitals are overcrowded. We're all here for what? I don't understand. Genocide?
Speaking at a weekly briefing in Moscow, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova denied Kiev accusation regarding Russia's involvement in the shelling of Mariupol theater.
Of course, the Kiev regime immediately tried to lay the blame for everything that happened in Mariupol, in particular for blowing up the drama theater building, on the Russian military who, in their opinion, allegedly dropped an aerial bomb on the theater building. Of course, this is a lie.
The port city is encircled by Russian forces. A statement from the city council said that about 30,000 residents had managed to escape so far, but more than 350,000 remained stuck there.
Russian strikes hit Kiev, Lviv in the west, and Kyiv and Kramatorsk in the east. A residential building in the Politysky district of Kiev collapsed after being hit by a strike, while isolated explosions targeting apartment buildings in the Ukrainian capital continue to awaken residents in daily terror. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky delivered a speech to members of the German Bundestag, the lower house of the German parliament, where he was applauded at the start and at end of his speech. And hours after his intervention in front of the German parliament, the Ukrainian president declared that, quote, the opinion of the Germans is changing. Let's have a listen.
We have seen Germany fight for the economy for decades, for the new Russian gas pipeline and the old European dreams, the dreams of a kind of cooperation that Russia has not taken seriously for a long time. We see that German opinion is changing.
Almost 4,000 people were evacuated from Ukrainian cities through humanitarian corridors on March the 17th. A senior official said a far smaller number than on the previous day, as Russia's military operation in Ukraine entered its fourth week. Ayedi Usama reports.
30,000 civilians have now left the southeastern city of Mariupol en route to Zaporizhia since Russia's military operation began. City Council said that the current situation in Mariupol is critical, with a Russian blockade which has now reached its 16th day. Residents live a severe shortage of food and water inside the city of Mariupol as they seek their first chances to move away from the Black Sea port city, which is being shelled by Russian forces.
Our flat was gone immediately. Our car, our apartment, our garage. That's all we managed to grab. The blanket, which flew out of the windows there. It was impossible to even get out of the basement. The house began to break down.
More than 350,000 residents of Mariupol are continuing to hide in shelters and basements to escape the continuous shelling by Russian military forces, with an average of 50 to 200 airstrikes hitting the city each day, causing enormous destructions. According to the City Council, which also estimated that about 80% of the city's housing structures are destroyed and 30% irreparably lost.
We're trying to survive somehow. It's just that I cannot tell my mother that I'm alive. My mother lives in Makiivka. I can't tell her I'm alive, you understand? There is no connection. Just nothing. It is cruel. My child is hungry. I don't know what to give him to eat.
Mariupol's strategic Black Sea port city has been encircled by Russian forces and subjected to fierce shelling that has entrapped hundreds of thousands of civilians. These last evacuations deepen the refugee crisis that Ukraine is living since the start of the Russian military operation, as bordering countries of Ukraine are still witnessing huge numbers of people fleeing their country to save their lives.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called the Russian military operation in Ukraine as war crimes, mentioning that in the last 3 weeks, Russia destroyed many cities in Ukraine and targeted civilians. It even pushed millions of Ukrainians to flee the country.
Yesterday, President Biden said that, in his opinion, war crimes have been committed in Ukraine. Personally, I agree. intentionally targeting civilians is a war crime. After all the destruction of the past 3 weeks, I find it difficult to conclude that the Russians are doing otherwise.
President Joe Biden will hold a call with his Chinese counterpart amid growing U.S. concerns over Beijing's relationship with Russia. The two leaders will hold a phone call today, Friday, at 1 p.m., according to the White House, as Washington warned China was considering military support for Russia's military operation in Ukraine.
We believe China in particular has a responsibility to use its influence with President Putin and to defend the international rules and principles that it professes to support. Instead, it appears that China is moving in the opposite direction by refusing to condemn this aggression while seeking to portray itself as a neutral arbiter. And we're concerned that they're considering directly assisting Russia with military equipment to use in Ukraine. President Biden will be speaking to President Xi tomorrow and will make clear that China will bear responsibility for any actions it takes to support Russia's aggression, and we will not hesitate to impose.
This is an opportunity for President Biden to assess where President Xi stands. There's been, of course, rhetorical support or the absence of clear rhetoric and denunciation, or the absence of denunciation by China of what Russia is doing. This flies in the face, of course, of everything China stands for, including the basic principles of the UN Charter, including the basic principles of respect for sovereignty of nations. And so the fact that China has not denounced what Russia is doing in and of itself speaks volumes.
A source that was not authorized to speak to media told Reuters anonymously that China sailed an aircraft carrier through the sensitive Taiwan Strait on Friday. This comes only hours before the Chinese and U.S. presidents were due to talk. China claims democratically governed Taiwan as its own and has increased military action near the island in recent years to bolster its sovereignty claims, frightening Taipei and Washington. The United Nations Security Council convened on Thursday an emergency meeting at the request of 6 Western nations seeking an open session on Ukraine before of a vote on a Russian humanitarian resolution that they have strongly opposed. Miriam Zian.
The United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting to discuss the Ukrainian conflict at the request of 6 Western nations. The Security Council witnessed a war of words at the Security Council, where officials accused Russia of conducting war crimes and violating international humanitarian law.
WHO has verified 43 attacks on health care, with 12 people killed and 34 injured, including health workers. In any conflict, attacks on health care are a violation of international humanitarian law.
One way to end this madness. President Putin, stop the killing, withdraw your forces, leave Ukraine once and for all.
On the other hand, Russian authorities maintain they did not start the conflict and have repeatedly decried reports of Russian military setbacks or civilians' deaths in Ukraine as fake news.
The accusation about the shelling of the infamous maternity hospital in Mariupol and the shelling of the Mariupol theater and the fact that Russia is not allowing refugees to leave and that Russia shelled the Moscow Sultan Suleiman in Mariupol and the Russia during ordering automatic weapons to shoot a bread line and turn it off, and this has been refuted many a time.
The meeting came in the wake of Russia's Security Council resolution proposition on Tuesday, which is expected to be voted on by the Council today, Friday. However, Nebenzia said that Russia decided not to seek a vote anymore, stressing that Moscow is not withdrawing the resolution.
Dmitry Medvedev, Deputy Secretary of Russia's Security Council, warned that the United States and that Moscow had the might to put the world's preeminent superpower in its place and accused the West of stoking a wild Russophobic plot to tear Russia apart. He added that the special military operation in Ukraine was necessary because the United States was using Ukraine to threaten them. NATO has started its greatest military exercise since the fall of the Soviet Union, bringing together tens of thousands of troops in a bold exhibition of the Western alliance's competence, unity and commitment at a time when Europe is becoming increasingly dangerous. Sofian Kantori.
NATO has started a big military exercise since years, bringing together tens of thousands of troops in a bold exhibition of Western Alliance competence. The major phase of the drill Trident Juncture, which stretched from the North Atlantic to the Baltic Sea and involves armed units from all 24 NATO members, as well as partners Finland and Sweden, began on October 25 in Norway and was intended to the last weeks. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said ahead of the drills.
This is an important day because Trident Juncture is NATO's biggest exercise since the end of the Cold War.
Moscow has criticized the drill, which comes amid continued tensions between NATO and Russia, which took Crimea from Ukraine in 2014 and supports rebels in an ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine, but accuses NATO of aggressive actions near its borders. Another source of discord is what NATO says is Russia's deployment of a missile that violates a key US-Russian nuclear arms treaty and could potentially be used to target alliance members in Europe.
Slovak Defense Minister Jaroslav Nad said after a meeting with his American counterpart Lloyd Austin that Slovakia was ready to offer Ukraine its S-300 air defense system on condition that it will be replaced immediately.
We've been in discussion with the United States, with Ukraine, and also with other allies on possibility to deploy or to send or to give S-300 system to Ukrainians. And we are willing to do so. We're willing to do so immediately when we have a proper replacement. The only strategic air defense system that we have in Slovakia is S-300 system. So what would happen immediately when we decide to give it to Ukrainians is that we actually create a gap, a security gap in NATO.
On the other hand, Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Konashenko announced that the Russian military and its separatist allies are now fighting in downtown Mariupol, a beleaguered strategic Ukrainian port in the southeast of the country.
In Mariupol, the units of the peoples of Donetsk, with the support of the Russian armed forces, tighten their grip of encirclement and fight the nationalists in the center of the city.
The conflict in Ukraine is now in its 23rd day. This morning, air raid sirens sounded in the western city of Lviv, followed by the sound of explosions and a column of smoke a few miles from the city's center. In Kyiv, more than 20 people were killed and 25 injured when an airstrike destroyed a school and a community center into the northeast of the Ukrainian city. Still in Kyiv, where a rescue worker has died and another was injured after a shopping center was shelled. The United Nations says it has recorded 780 confirmed civilian deaths since the conflict began, and 3.2 million people have fled. Diplomatic efforts continue. The Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said we have stronger hopes for a ceasefire after meeting with his Ukrainian counterpart Dmitry Kuleba in Lviv. And now Japan imposes more sanctions on 15 Russian individuals and 9 organizations, among them defense officials and the state-owned armed exporter. These sanctions, which include the freezing of assets, are Japan's latest measures since Russia started its military operation in Ukraine on February the 24th. The finance ministry said that these sanctions are covering 76 individuals, 7 banks and 12 other bodies in Russia. The official Saudi press agency reported that Riyadh has issued a royal directive to extend the validity of visas of Ukrainian nationals currently residing in Saudi Arabia. The extension of visas will be automatic without the need to visit the migration authorities. Argentina's Senate gave final legislative approval Thursday for President Alberto Fernandez's administration to refinance the government's $45 billion debt with the International Monetary Fund and avoid a default. Marwa Bilawar reports.
Argentina's Senate approved the government's $45 billion agreement with the International Monetary Fund on clearing the way for its final approval by the lender's board of directors. The lawmakers voted 56-13 with 3 abstentions to approve the deal signed with the IMF in early March, which was approved by the Chamber of Deputies last week. Outside the Senate, clashes erupted and several hundred people demonstrated and threw stones at the building, set fire to tires and garbage containers, called by unions and leftist movements to oppose the restructuring.
What they have always done in the 21 agreements signed by Argentina with the fund: adjustment, adjustment, poverty, adjustment, until it breaks out. The government has to understand that it has to control foreign trade, that he's failing the Argentine people, that he must start governing for the social base that brought him to power in 2019.
A positive vote by the IMF's board approval would finalize the deal after 2 years of negotiations with technical staff and mark the country's 22nd agreement with the multilateral lender. President Alberto Fernandez's unusual step of making the legislature vote on the agreement exposed a divide with opposition lawmakers and within his own left-wing coalition.
Global stocks fell on Friday amid Russia-Ukraine peace talks' slow progress. The MSCI World Stock Index was flat at 695 points, up 5.4% for the week, while oil prices remained above $100 a barrel after slim progress in peace talks between Russia and Ukraine raised the fear of tighter sanctions and a prolonged disruption to crude supply. African News' Ronald Cato interviewed the United States representative to the UN Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield on the ramification of the military operation in Ukraine for African countries.
It's really great to be here with you. We know that the impact of this war of aggression that the Russians initiated in Ukraine will have an impact on the world. Ukraine has been one of the major exporters of wheat to Africa, for example. I think the figures I have is about 2.4 billion in 2021 of trade between Ukraine and Africa. But it is the war that has led to this, and this is why Africans need to be part of the solution to bringing this unconscionable war to an end.
In the 3 weeks since Russia started its military operation in Ukraine, the World Health Organization has confirmed 43 assaults on healthcare institutions, with hundreds more under danger. WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus addressed the organization's efforts to fulfill Ukrainians' immediate health needs in a speech on Wednesday, saying that additional donor help is required, so yet only $8 million of the WHO's $57.5 million request has been received. British Finance Minister Rishi Sunak must decide next week whether to spend millions or billions of pounds more to ease the growing cost of living squeeze for households and businesses as inflation soars higher. Sunak, who is due to deliver a budget update on Wednesday, wants to direct the UK public finances back to normality after a COVID spending surge, which pushed government borrowing to its highest ever in peacetime. French President Emmanuel Macron has unveiled his proposals to boost the economy, fight inequality and improve finances, or France's reaction to global crises if he wins a second term in next month's election. Macron spoke at a press conference that was his first major campaign event, taking time off from his focus on the war in Ukraine to provide details about his vision for the next 5 years. Former Bulgarian Prime Minister Boyko Borisov and members of his staff were arrested during a large-scale operation by the European Prosecutor's Office and the Bulgarian police Thursday night. Police say the arrests are part of a large-scale investigation into 120 cases by the European Prosecutor's Office in Bulgaria. This is the biggest operation led by the European Prosecutor's Office since its establishment, as well as the highest-ranking Bulgarian politicians arrested in recent Bulgarian history. China's business capital, Shanghai, is moving ahead with a mass testing program to combat a fresh wave of COVID-19 infections, although some areas are loosening lockdown requirements to reduce inconveniences. On March the 17th, the city, which has a population of around 25 million people, saw 57 symptomatic local community infections and 203 asymptomatic domestically transmitted cases, up from 8 and 150 cases the day before. Shanghai, which has escaped the coronavirus so far, has closed schools and initiated a city-wide testing program that has been hundreds of residents' compounds locked down for at least 48 hours. That's all for me, Nadia Kasmi, and the rest of the team. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye for now.